The Central Bank of Nigeria is ready to take over dormant accounts in Nigeria. Now, it's asking banks in the country to transfer funds in accounts that have been dormant for up to 10 years into a trust fund account to be domiciled with the CBN. A circular accompanying the exposure draft stated that the guidelines were in response to requests from banks and other stakeholders for the CBN to clarify the procedures for the management of dormant and inactive accounts by banks in the country. The plan is for the balances in the dormant accounts to be invested in government securities like treasury bills and would be refunded and returned to the beneficiaries no later than 10 days of notice. Now, this plan is backed by Nigeria's Finance Act 2020 under Part 12 of the Companies and Allied Matters Act. The CBN listed the eligible dormant accounts and unclaimed balances to include current, savings and term deposits, domiciliary accounts, prepaid card accounts. This also includes unclaimed salaries and wages, proceeds of state, local and foreign currency drafts, and judgment debts that have not been claimed by the creditor. Joining me now is Mukhtar Mohammed, financial analyst and the CEO of Asher Dynamic Solutions. Mukhtar, welcome again to Business Edge. It's always good to see you.
Thank you, too. Same here, too.
So this is not the first time that we've heard of the central bank going towards this area of dormant accounts and other financial assets. There was a lawsuit about 2 years ago over this, but we keep hearing guidelines being issued, the policies in place. Is it something that has been affected, or are we seeing that implementation is just now about to start?
I think implementation is just now about to start. And I think this one policy, I think I support the CBN to do, not like the previous one that the federal government was about using the Securities and Exchange Commission, where it said unclaimed dividend will be collected by the government and will be borrowed by the government, and without any interest for those that will later on come to claim their dividend. But in this case, the CBN is saying instead of the money lying dormant there, we will more or less invest it for you, make sure it generates revenue for you, just lying down there. Some of them have been there for 10 years. Some of them have been there for over 10 years. I think it's a good policy. We need to look at what the implementation is going to be like. And as I said, I have to give 10 days notice to us if I want to maybe get back, reactivate those accounts, and they'll give me 10 days, give them 10 days notice for them to send the money back to my account. Again, we need to look at reactivation of this account. If you are reactivating the account, what are the procedures? So you don't take a month trying to reactivate, then after that you take 10 days trying to get the money from CBN. Yeah, so I think it's a good policy. It's better than what, like I said, it's better than the unclaimed dividend policy of the Securities and Exchange Commission. And again, I think why they are doing that also, this dormant account money has also created room for fraudulent activities, especially by bankers, especially whereby we've heard news whereby bankers know people that are dead. Sometimes they move this account within themselves, and then decide to use it for their own personal gain. So I think it will be a good thing if it's implementable.
So let's look at dormant accounts, because there are some reports about the number of dormant accounts and the amount of money in these accounts in Nigeria. One report puts the money at over 500 billion naira. Another says it's around 890 something billion naira that's been left abandoned in bank accounts. When you do the math with the Nigeria Interbank Settlement System's 2021 fact sheets, that means there are about some 57 million inactive accounts in Nigeria. So is this a staggering number? Is it an issue? Is it something we should really be concerned about? Why do we have so many dormant accounts?
Well, we have dormant accounts. Sometimes these accounts, before the advent of BVN, people open accounts everywhere in the bank. Some people open savings here, open another savings there. Sometimes do some transaction there. At the end of the day, they are not doing transactions, and then they just leave the account dormant. I think the major challenge in terms of the dormant account for me is when people passed on. Some of them, are culture. Some of them did not have a proper will, and again, the process of even turning this account to an estate account could be very cumbersome, and sometimes people just abandon the whole project. And some of these dormant accounts also are accounts of Nigerian people that were Nigerians, they were stationed here in Nigeria, and now they have moved abroad. So most of them are not even doing anything with those accounts again. Then again, when you talk about salary account, I think it has to do with what we've been saying, because there's been the time that the Ministry of Finance said that they discovered a lot of account that salary were being paid into, and they were not civil servants. So I think that also is one way to address that. We'll begin to see by the time this money are being moved into treasury by the government, some of these people knowing that they got this money to fraudulent means will not be able to reclaim them back. So I think basically that's the main reason why we have a lot of dormant account. But the two main things is some people passed on, there's no will, even their family doesn't even know what they have in their account. Then the compulsory nature of even accessing those accounts, going to court, doing the probate and coming back to give it to the bank, others checks and balances, it makes it sometimes they just abandon it. For me, that is the major cause of most of the dormant account you see in Nigerian banks.
Okay, so let's look up the objectives now. The CBN has said part of the objectives of this plan include: 1, identifying dormant accounts and unclaimed balances and financial assets to reunite them with their beneficial owners; 2, hold funds in trust for the beneficial owners; 3, standardize the management of dormant accounts, unclaimed balances, and financial assets; and 4, establish a standard procedure for reclaiming warehoused funds. But Mukhtar, when we look at the first two objectives, isn't that already being taken care of with the dormant funds in the banks where they're already being held? Because again, at the end of the day, the banks know who the dormant accounts and the unclaimed balances and financial assets belong to, and they're also, quote unquote, holding it in trust. That's an objective that the banks already seem to be fulfilling.
You could say that the objective that the banks are already fulfilling. But again, if you have this dormant account and you go to the bank tells you have to bring more documents, it's more or less like they are reopening another account. So definitely, I think that is what they are also looking at. Sometimes banks also use this dormant account also to boost up their liquidity status. They will say, oh, we have a number of liquidity because those accounts are there. This is also a means of CBN to know the true liquidity status of some of these banks. And I can tell you there's a particular bank that normally have the large chunk of these monies in their own coffer because of the years and the length of the bank. So a lot of people have passed on. Like I said, that's the main dormant account you see are people that are no more alive or people that are not resident in Nigeria. So definitely, I think it's also a ways to know the true liquidity natures of this bank. You know, that was the main reason why CBN at a point now make sure that all banks have their year end in December. So this is also another means of rejigging the system, monitoring to make sure that they are not caught unaware, especially in the area of liquidity.
So let's look at the bank accounts that are eligible to fall into this policy. So the CBN has listed them to include accounts that have unclaimed balances, to include current, savings, and term deposits, domiciliary accounts, prepaid card accounts, and even more. You also have unclaimed salaries and wages as well, proceeds of state, local, and foreign currency drafts, and judgment debts that have not been claimed by the creditor. Now, the bank said it reserves the right to designate any other deposits or financial assets to be included in the list of eligible dormant accounts. This is really a wide variety, but do you think the central bank has really covered the spectrum of the kind of accounts that could end up having their funds transferred into this savings or trust fund, which we'll be discussing next?
I think they have done that. They are the institutions, and I'm sure they must have studied it. They have done that. The only one that they didn't talk about is the unclaimed dividend funds, because most of these unclaimed dividend funds from equities are also domiciled with the banks also, because some of the banks also are part of the people that were supposed to pay this dividend. So that's the only area they didn't touch, but you know that area also belongs to the Security and Exchange Commission. So I think they've covered a lot in that spectrum. But I expect them to be able to come up with modality on how this will work so that we don't have a situation whereby we have a policy but implementation becomes very challenging.
Let's talk about the implementation, because these unclaimed funds are going to be transferred into an unclaimed balances trust fund pool account domiciled at the CBN, which can then be invested in government securities like treasury bills, as it may be. So let's basically simplify this. What options does the government, or at this point the CBN, have to invest those funds that will keep the money safe to a certain relative points? And also, what does the government gain in this situation?
I think government gain will come in the area of taxes and also in projects. Remember that treasury bill or bonds are also issues that government used to also go about some of the projects that they're about to do. So definitely that also will work. But I think basically it's all about making sure that these monies are not lying dormant for fraudulent activities. And again, some of this money also we got into fraudulent activities. So when they are dormant like that, the owners cannot come and claim it because of the issues surrounding those money. So it has its very, very good side. And I think it's one of the best policy the CBN has come up with in terms of mopping liquidity, in terms of not allowing those people to lose their money. Just like because in the Securities and Exchange Commission, after you have, I mean, the Nigerian Stock Exchange, the Securities and Exchange Commission, after those unclaimed dividends are kept with you for after 10 years, and you did not come to claim it, those money will be taken back to the companies, and those companies sometimes use this money and make it very difficult, even when when the owners will finally come to claim it, when they are not able to claim it. But in this instance, it's with the CBN, and the CBN have put up a proper guideline and said after that, in 10 days, your money will be released to you. I think the guideline from the CBN is clear and direct compared to what we have in the Securities and Exchange Commission.
So let's look at something else, because the question is, you've talked about implementation. I think the question many people would ask about this is, what do we know about government's plans for the money that they're going to make from this policy? Last week on one of our programs, Politics HQ, we talked about the fact that there are questions as to what the government has done with money that it's made back from the whistleblowing policy of the government. Money has been returned, but there are questions as to what that money has been used for. So Nigerians have a trust deficit with our governments, we know. What do we know that the government or the CBN is going to do with whatever it makes from this policy?
I think I don't know yet. I think it's ongoing. I think it's ongoing. And they said that they are engaging stakeholders. In the next 2 weeks, they will come up with a clear cut. But we know that this government needs funds. But again, how much trust do we think we want the government to be using our money also to begin to do some of this project? But again, it's governance is continuous, and the good thing is that you will not lose your money, because whichever governor comes in, we have to pay for what the previous government have collected from you. So for me, that's just the good thing. But what they want to use it for, I think maybe after the 2 weeks, they will begin to come up. There are a lot of things government can use this money for, but I'm excited that government is not just saying we want to use the money, but they said we will also pay interest on those funds. For me, that is the key.
Okay, that is the key. So let's look at something else. So at times when the conversation around government making use of unclaimed dividends and funds in dormant accounts come up, there's also been somewhat of a tussle between who should be in charge of the funds. At one time, the Debt Management Office said it should be in charge of unclaimed dividends and deposits in dormant accounts because it has the mandate to manage debts on behalf of the government. Then there's the Securities and Exchange Commission, which said it should be SEC because the money was going to be invested in things like treasury bills. So when we look at all of this, there are obviously stakeholders who are quite invested, or at least have vested interest in the long run. But the CBN is saying that these funds for dormant accounts and these other financial assets will be domiciled with the CBN. Are they the right party, or should we see a situation where they're the main manager and then there is input from the Securities and Exchange Commission and even the Debt Management Office?
No, I think it's purely a CBN affair. They are the regulators of these money banks. So the Debt Management Office can have its issue with Securities and Exchange Commission because that's an investment. But these are money that are not being invested into anything. They are just kept there. And so the CBN is coming up with a strategy to make sure that these monies are not just kept dormant. So for me, I think that is the CBN prerogative. In a lot of Nigeria, we have more confidence to keep those money with CBN than even keeping them with the government. Because a lot of Nigerians, when the government said they were going to collect unclaimed dividend, a lot of them started trooping in to claim that their dividend. They don't trust government. But with the CBN, I think it's the good news, like I said, is that it's invested in an investment that will be documented. So by the time you come there, sometimes you see it. I can assure you that some of these owners of this dormant account, by the time they see what those dormant accounts were able to provide for them in terms of added capital into their already fixed capital, they may even say, can we continue rolling it over? So it's a good initiative for the short and the long term. But like I said, implementation must come clear on how this policy will be implemented, and also sincerity of purpose, whereby we'll have a clear laid down procedures that will not be cumbersome, so that those people that have those dormant accounts will be able to come forth and claim this account. And I think it's the bank, so they should work with the banks. These people have their addresses, they have nest of kings that were there when they opened this account, so they should reach out to them. For me, they should reach out to them first and make sure that they are also in support of this. Then they can go ahead with it, not just taking their money today and the rightful owner comes tomorrow. What happened? He has to wait for that 10 days.
All right, Mukhtar, before I let you go, we know that the guidelines have also penalties stated for banks that violate the provisions. Now, any bank or financial institution that violates the provisions will face a penalty of no less than 2 million naira, and failure to adhere to the directives regarding any breach would then result in an additional daily penalty of 200,000 naira until compliance is achieved or decided by the central bank. When we see these policies, and we've seen the central bank attempt to come down hard on the banks on several issues, the latest one that will come to many people's mind is the Naira redesign policy, the back and not so forth that was going on between the central bank and the banks. But when you look at this deterrent, do you think this will deter banks from holding on to these funds themselves? Is the CBN in the right direction with the 2 million naira fine and the 200,000 daily fine as well?
I think I have a problem when it comes to the CBN in terms of coming out with these fines and penalty. Remember, just like what they did with the Naira redesigning, where they say you cannot withdraw of certain amount from the account above the counter, and some Nigerians took them to court. In court, says CBN cannot be a judge in its own matter. It's not the right of CBN to fine anybody of any offense. The CBN has to go through the legal procedure that will be binding on that it's only legal. The competent court of law is supposed to impose a penalty on any defaulter when it comes to financial issues. CBN is supposed to look at that, put it in its act. But even if it's in the act, it's only the court that will give the final judgment on the amount that you'll be paid for. So definitely, I think the CBN we should trade cautiously, because that has happened before, and the Supreme Court has given judgment on that.
All right, so the bank has said there are 2 weeks for inputs. If you're to give your inputs into this policy that's finally going to take off, it seems like now, not a new policy, but one that looks to be ready to take off, what input would you give the central bank?
I said that to be sincere, and documentation is key. Also, how long will they continue to hold these funds? We need to know, are you holding it for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? Or if you come to a point that we know that, okay, there's nobody coming for this fund, what now happened to those funds? Will it be continuously considered? Because it's sheer madness. If I keep on investing money that is not my own and the owner doesn't come, would there come a point whereby the CBN, through the federal government, will just confiscate those money and say, because these people have not appeared here in 10 or 20 years, the money now belongs to the CBN? I think those are part of the things that I need them to clear.
All right, so we look for some clarity in the coming days and weeks on this policy. Mukhtar Mohammed, as always, thank you so much for your time today.
My pleasure, Tolulope.